Hey guys, this evening we're going to delve into what the experience of finding a partner was like during the Victorian age. And believe me, if you think navigating modern romance is complex with all its apps and unclear signals, just wait until you hear about the labyrinth of etiquette books, necessary chaperones, and social regulations that dictated practically every single exchange between men and women back in the 1850s. We are examining a period when even sharing a direct glance was governed by guidelines, when a simple gesture of tipping one's hat essentially served as a text message, and when accepting a gift from an unsuitable individual could permanently damage one's social standing. Oh, and if these kinds of tales are appealing to you, please consider hitting the like button or subscribing. I am very interested to know where all of you are tuning in from, so leave a comment letting me know your current location and what time it is there. It consistently amazes me how people are relaxing and drifting off to this all across the globe. Alright, find your comfiest spot, take a nice deep breath, and allow your body to fully settle into whatever you're resting on. We're transporting ourselves back to London in 1855, and believe me, you're going to be truly appreciative of that mattress by the time we finish. The Victorians had a specific phrase for romantic pursuit, but it didn't mean what you might assume. Making love back then simply referred to courtship, the careful practice of wooing someone appropriately. And if you intended to successfully navigate the Victorian scene for marriage, you absolutely needed to master the protocols. So, congratulations, you've just awakened in the month of May 1855, right in the central part of London. But it's not the London that you are familiar with. This is Queen Victoria's London, where smoke from coal fires hangs as heavily as a morning fog, where the clatter of horse hooves echoes against the cobblestone streets outside your window, and where the smell, the odour is something else entirely. The River Thames, just down the road, carries all the waste from 2.5 million residents, and on warm days like this one, that powerful scent wafts directly through your bedroom window. Your nose wrinkles automatically as you pull the heavy woolen blankets up closer to your chin. The encouraging news is that you are 22 years old and belong to a well-regarded middle-class family. Your father operates a small yet successful gentleman's outfitter shop, which means you possess sufficient funds for respectable clothing and meals, but not enough to live a life completely free of duties. The less fortunate news? You are a woman in 1855, which dictates that your whole future relies on one crucial objective: securing a respectable husband. And the precise rules for accomplishing that are about as complex as attempting to waltz while simultaneously trying to juggle porcelain teacups. You stretch your legs beneath the rough cotton sheets, feeling the substantial weight of the heavy quilt pressing gently against your chest. There is no central heating unit in this home. It won't even be invented for many more decades. Therefore, every morning commences with a deep, bone-chilling cold that permeates the thick stone walls. Your housemaid, named Mary, has already been awake since 5 in the morning, lighting the coal fires located downstairs, and you can already hear her heavy, measured footsteps on the wooden staircase as she struggles to carry the coal scuttle up to start the fire within your bedroom grate. That coal scuttle container weighs approximately 30 pounds when fully loaded, and she will transport dozens of them up and down these stairs before the day is complete. The bedroom door gives a slow creak, and Mary quietly slips inside, her arms straining noticeably from the load of coal. Her hands are already stained black with soot, and you observe the way she favours her left shoulder, likely strained from all that constant heavy lifting. She kneels beside your fireplace, and you watch her practised, capable hands arrange the kindling and the coal using quick, efficient movements. The initial spark catches, then swiftly expands, and very soon a small, steady orange glow begins to push back against the morning's persistent cold. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, wiping her sooty hands against her apron. "Your mother asked me to tell you to dress with extra care today. The Weatherbees are scheduled to call this afternoon, and they are bringing their son." your stomach gives a small, nervous flip. The Weatherbys? You have heard talk about their son, Thomas, who is 26 years old and has recently returned home from India, where he was employed as an administrative clerk for the East India Company. Your mother has been subtly hinting about this visit for several weeks now, and you fully understand its meaning. This is much more than merely a social call. This is essentially an assessment. You sit straight up in your bed, feeling the cool air hit your bare shoulders through the cotton nightgown. The fire is already starting to warm the room a bit, but it will take another hour before the deep chill genuinely dissipates. You observe Mary as she moves around the space, meticulously laying out your clothes for the upcoming day, not just your everyday clothing. She lays out your best daytime dress, the one constructed from dark blue wool with tiny mother-of-pearl buttons that required your mother 3 full months to save up enough money to purchase. Mary, you say, your voice still rough from sleep. What information do you have about the Weatherby son? She quickly glances toward the door, then leans in closer to whisper. Well, miss, I heard gossip from their own housemaid that he still has all of his natural teeth, which is saying something for most gentlemen his age, and she mentioned he doesn't consume an excessive amount of alcohol, although he does have quite a preference for expensive cigars. She pauses briefly, arranging your corset item on the bed. Of course, he's been living in India for the last 4 years, so he might have developed a few unusual ideas about certain things. The corset. You look at it with weary resignation. Every single morning, Mary will carefully lace you into this restrictive device made of whale bones and tightly woven cotton that compresses your ribcage until you find it difficult to breathe naturally. It is specifically designed to create that ideal hourglass silhouette which is currently considered fashionable, but it also means you will spend the entirety of the day feeling as though someone has their hands firmly wrapped around your waist, squeezing you gently but relentlessly. You swing your legs out of bed and your bare feet make contact with the cold wooden floor. The floorboards are wide, thick planks of polished oak made smooth by decades of daily use, and they always feel cold, no matter how warm the fire eventually becomes. You stand up, and Mary immediately begins unlacing your nightgown. This is entirely normal. Personal privacy, as you well know, doesn't truly exist for women of your station. Mary has already seen you unclothed countless times, and she will continue to assist in dressing and undressing you until the time of your marriage, at which point your husband's valet or your very own lady's maid will assume the duty. The chemise goes on first, a light cotton undergarment that feels like wearing a thin tea towel, and then comes the corset. Mary carefully positions it around your waist and immediately starts pulling the laces tight. With every pull, your breathing becomes slightly more shallow. By the time she has finished securing it, you are forced to take small, careful breaths solely from the very top of your lungs. Deep, expansive breathing is literally impossible inside this thing. Not too tight, Mary, you manage to say, although both of you know it is already as loose as current fashion will permit. Of course not, miss. Your mother specifically instructed that you must be capable of speaking clearly when the gentleman arrives. Next come the additional layers. First, a bustle pad that fastens around your waist, which is essentially a small pillow that pushes your skirt outward behind you into the fashionable bell shape. Then come the petticoats, 3 separate ones, each one adding more bulk and significant weight. By the time Mary lowers your dress over your head, you're wearing approximately 15 pounds of heavy fabric, and that's before we even consider the shoes. The shoes are made of kid leather, soft and smooth to the touch, but completely flat. Heels will not become a widespread fashion trend for another few decades. They button up the side of your ankle with tiny pearl buttons that Mary must secure using a special hook tool. Your feet, encased in cotton stockings, feel secure but not especially comfortable. These particular shoes were certainly not crafted for walking long distances. They were made specifically for sitting politely in parlours and taking short, delicate, graceful steps. while Mary skillfully pins your hair into the elaborate style that is currently fashionable, parted severely right down the middle, then swept back into a low chignon knot with carefully arranged curls framing your face. You contemplate what this very afternoon might bring. The Weatherby visit is effectively an employment interview, except the specific job title is wife, and the interview process involves sitting quietly in your family's front parlour, maintaining polite conversation while both sets of parents meticulously observe your every word, every subtle gesture, and every facial expression. If Thomas Weatherby finds you to be a suitable match, he might then ask your father for his official permission to call on you. If your father grants his agreement, then the formal courtship procedure will commence, which could last anywhere from a brief few weeks to several months. During this entire period, you will never, ever be permitted to be alone with him. Every single conversation must occur under the constant, watchful eye of a chaperone, usually your mother or your unmarried Aunt Caroline, who resides with your family and holds strong, firm opinions about virtually everything. Mary finishes pinning your hair and steps back slightly to inspect her work. You look closely at yourself in the small handheld mirror that rests on your dressing table. The face that stares back at you is pale, deliberately so, since having tanned skin suggests you work outdoors like a servant. Your lips retain their natural colour, since applying makeup is strictly considered improper for any unmarried young ladies. Your eyebrows are your own, dark and neatly shaped. The overall visual effect is intended to convey innocence, profound modesty, and good breeding. "You look absolutely lovely, miss," Mary says, and you can sense that she genuinely means it. "Now, should I bring up your breakfast?" Breakfast arrives on a tray. Warm porridge topped with a small amount of cream, slices of toast spread with butter and tea that is strong enough to practically strip paint. The porridge is certainly filling but quite bland. The toast is actually quite excellent. The bread was baked freshly this morning by the cook, and the tea is precisely what you need to finally wake up fully. You eat with extreme care, highly mindful of your very tight corset and the certainty that any accidental spill will stain your dark dress. After breakfast, your mother appears framed in your doorway. At 45, she remains an attractive woman, although the numerous years of childbearing and constant financial worry have etched fine lines around the corners of her eyes. She is wearing her second best dress, a dark brown wool with black trim, and her hair is styled similarly to yours but with a more severe, mature presentation. "Good morning, dear," she says, stepping inside your room and quietly closing the door behind her. "We must have a quick discussion before this afternoon." You set down your teacup and give her your complete, full attention. These private discussions almost always involve vital information. "Now, you fully understand why the Weatherbys are coming to call," she begins, settling herself gently on the edge of your bed. "Thomas requires a wife, and you, my dear, require a husband. It is primarily a practical arrangement, but that is no reason why it cannot become a pleasant one, provided you both conduct yourselves with utmost propriety." She pauses briefly, smoothing down her skirt. "I have been corresponding with Mrs. Weatherby, and she has shared some details about her son that you should certainly know. He is well educated, he has strong prospects for continued advancement in his company, and he has managed to save a considerable amount of money during his 4 years in India. He is also, according to his mother, quite eager to settle down and establish a family." You nod your head, although your stomach is performing nervous little flips. Starting a family, that is the most polite way of referencing the intimate physical aspects of marriage that no one ever dares to discuss directly, but that constantly hover over every courtship like a looming shadow. "Now, there are some essential rules you absolutely must adhere to this afternoon," your mother continues firmly. "First, you must not accept any form of gift from him, no matter how insignificant it may seem. A respectable gentleman should not be offering gifts to a lady he is not formally engaged to. and accepting them inappropriately suggests that you are encouraging his attentions. This comes directly from the etiquette books that your mother reads religiously. The Young Lady's Friend, published in 1837, specifically warns that one gift will inevitably lead to another, and ultimately encourage the gentleman to offer you their heart. Second, you must not physically touch him in any capacity. No shaking hands unless he is formally introduced to you by your father, and even then, keep the contact extremely brief. If he should offer you his arm, you may take it lightly, but otherwise keep your hands gracefully folded in your lap. You think about how extraordinarily strange this must seem to young people today, where casual physical touching is considered so normal. But in 1855, physical contact between two unmarried people is an extremely serious matter. Even formally engaged couples are limited to briefly holding hands and perhaps exchanging chaste, quick kisses, and always under constant supervision. Third, allow him to guide the conversation topics, but do not hesitate to display your intelligence. He has received an excellent education, so he will certainly appreciate a woman who is able to discuss subjects beyond the weather. But do not contradict him in a direct manner. Even if you firmly disagree, find gentle, subtle ways to express a different viewpoint. This is truly a delicate balancing act. Too much obvious intelligence, and you risk being perceived as unfeminine or threatening. Too little, and you might appear boring or simply unintelligent. You have been meticulously practicing this difficult balancing act your entire life. Finally, your mother says, reaching over to delicately adjust a curl near your ear, always remember that he is assessing you just as much as you are assessing him. Pay close attention to how he interacts with the servants, how he speaks to your father, and how he responds when things do not proceed exactly as planned. These small, telling things will reveal far more about his fundamental character than his polished, polite parlour conversation. She stands up, brushing some imaginary lint from her skirt. The Weatherbys will arrive at 3 o'clock exactly. We will serve tea and the small cakes that Cook baked yesterday. You will sit on the settee located near the window. The natural light is most flattering there, and I will sit in the nearby chair. Your father will join us after he has concluded his private discussion with Mr. Weatherby about business matters. After your mother quietly leaves, you find yourself with several hours to occupy before the afternoon's required performance. You walk downstairs to the family's small library, really just a room containing 2 tall bookcases and a comfortable window seat, and select a volume of poetry. It is considered socially acceptable for young ladies to read poetry, although novels are still viewed as somewhat questionable material. You settle into the window seat and attempt to concentrate on the verses, but your mind keeps wandering back to the afternoon ahead. The house surrounding you is gradually coming to life. You can hear Cook noisily banging pots in the kitchen as she prepares the midday meal. The housemaid is currently sweeping the front steps, a necessary task that must be done twice every day because of all the coal smoke and unpleasant horse droppings in the street outside. Your father is secluded in his study, carefully reviewing the shop's account books. The house is filled with the mingled smells of coal fire, beeswax polish, and the lavender water your mother uses to lightly freshen the linens. Through the window pane, you watch the activity on the street. Outside, a milk cart slowly rolls past, the driver calling out his wares in a clear voice that easily carries through the glass. 2 ladies walk past, their full skirts swaying gently with each step, their arms linked together as they chat privately. They are both wearing the same basic style of dress as you, dark colours, full skirts, tight bodices. But you can instantly tell from the superior quality of their fabric that they originate from far wealthier families. Walking respectfully behind them is their maid, carrying their various parcels and maintaining a respectful distance. A gentleman on horseback trots past next, sitting very straight in his saddle, his top hat positioned perfectly. He is wearing a dark coat with long tails and light-coloured trousers, the standard daytime attire for men of his specific class. As he passes your window, he subtly touches the brim of his hat in a polite greeting, even though he does not know you personally. This is expected behaviour. Gentlemen are required to acknowledge ladies, even perfect strangers, with this small, formal gesture of respect. The morning passes very slowly. You read a few more poems, assist your mother in arranging fresh flowers for the front parlour, and practice a musical piece on the pianoforte. Playing music is one of the important accomplishments expected of well-bred young ladies, along with speaking a little bit of French, doing meticulous needlework, and being able to sketch passably. You are not actually expected to be brilliant at any of these skills, just competent enough to demonstrate that you have received a proper, respectable education. Lunch is a very simple affair. Cold meat, bread, cheese, and some pickled vegetables. You eat very lightly, partially because your tightly laced corset makes large meals very uncomfortable, and partially because you're too nervous about the afternoon to have much real appetite. Your mother chatters lightly about various neighbours and local gossip, but you can clearly tell that she is nervous too. A good, advantageous marriage for you would instantly solve several of the family's lingering financial concerns and securely establish your future. No pressure at all. At 2:30, your mother announces that it is time for the final preparations. You go upstairs to check your appearance one final time. Mary has laid out fresh gloves, white cotton ones that button neatly at the wrist, and your small locket, the only piece of jewellery considered appropriate for an unmarried lady who is receiving visitors. The locket contains a miniature painted portrait of your grandmother, and it rests just below the high neckline of your dress. You practice the act of sitting down gracefully, which is far more challenging than it sounds when you are wearing all of these restrictive layers. The required trick is to lower yourself very slowly, allowing your skirt to settle around you in an attractive arrangement, then gently fold your hands in your lap. Getting up requires pushing down firmly on the arms of the chair and rising smoothly without displaying any of the significant effort involved. At 10 minutes before 3 o'clock, you are stationed in the front parlour, sitting exactly on the settee as you were instructed. Your mother sits nearby in her assigned chair, needlework resting in her lap to give her hands something proper to do. Your father stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes with nervous energy. The room smells strongly of beeswax and the fresh flowers your mother arranged just this morning. Late afternoon sunlight streams brightly through the windows, and you hope that it is indeed as flattering as your mother promised it would be. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks steadily toward 3 o'clock. Each second feels significantly longer than the last. Your palms are slightly damp inside your restrictive gloves, and you resist the powerful urge to nervously fidget with your skirt. This is it, the beginning of what could very well be the rest of your life. At precisely 3 o'clock, there is a firm, decisive knock at the front door. Your father opens the door, and you hear the low murmur of male voices in the entrance hall, formal greetings, the rustle of heavy coats being removed, the sharp tap of walking sticks being placed in the umbrella stand. Then, footsteps approach the parlour, and your heart rapidly hammers against the rigid stays of your corset. Mr. Weatherby enters first. Thomas's father is a distinguished gentleman with silver side whiskers, and a slight stoop that clearly suggests hours spent bent over tedious account books. Behind him enters Mrs. Weatherby, a round woman dressed in burgundy silk whose expensive jewellery catches the afternoon light. Finally, Thomas himself steps through the doorway. He is taller than you had initially expected, with neatly combed brown hair parted precisely down the middle, and thick mutton chop whiskers that frame a lean face. His skin possesses a subtle golden undertone that immediately speaks of his recent years spent under the Indian sun, and when he moves, there is a careful, almost precise quality to his gestures that suggests some sort of military training. He is wearing a long black frock coat that reaches nearly to his knees, grey trousers and a white shirt with an extremely high stiff collar that looks as though it might actually strangle him if he turns his head too quickly. "Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby," your father says formally. "May I please present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Eleanor Hartwell." You rise from the settee very slowly, very gracefully, allowing your heavy skirts to settle around you as you have practiced 1,000 times before. You offer a small curtsy, just a slight dip of your knees and a minimal incline of your head. Too deep would wrongly suggest you are of a lower social status. Too shallow would appear openly disrespectful. "Miss Hartwell," Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, "what an utter pleasure it is to finally meet you." Thomas has been quite eager for this introduction. Thomas steps forward slightly and offers a brief, formal bow. "Miss Hartwell." His voice is noticeably deeper than you had anticipated, with just the faintest hint of an accent you cannot quite place, perhaps picked up during his extensive time overseas. "Mr. Weatherby," you reply, meeting his eyes briefly before instinctively lowering your gaze. Direct eye contact is acceptable only for the initial greeting, but prolonged staring would be instantly considered brazen and inappropriate. Everyone settles into their pre-assigned positions, much like actors taking their marks on a stage. Thomas sits in the chair directly across from you, close enough to sustain a conversation, but far enough away to rigorously maintain propriety. The parents arrange themselves as subtle chaperones, present but attempting to appear fully absorbed in their own quiet discussion about mutual acquaintances and current local news. "I sincerely trust your journey home from India was a pleasant one," you venture, since it is considered perfectly acceptable for ladies to inquire about travel. "Indeed, though rather lengthy," Thomas replies. 3 months aboard ship provides ample time for deep reflection. "I found myself quite ready to return to English soil and English society." He pauses and you catch something in his tone, perhaps a sense of relief, perhaps something deeper. The climate there can be quite challenging for those of us unaccustomed to such intensity. You nod sympathetically. Although you have never personally been farther from London than Brighton, you say, "I imagine the overwhelming heat must be quite oppressive. We complain significantly when our summer temperatures even reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, we often experienced temperatures well above 100 degrees, with a humidity level that made the very air feel thick as soup." He subtly shifts in his chair, and you now notice how he unconsciously loosens his tight collar just slightly. "I confess I developed a profound appreciation for simple English rain during my time away." This elicits a small smile from you, a genuine one this time, not the practiced parlour smile your mother had patiently taught you. "Rain is certainly something we have in plentiful abundance." The conversation continues in this careful, ritualistic dance. Thomas shares stories about the bustling markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to enjoy, and the professional challenge of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your own, much smaller experiences, the specific books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing, your general observations about life here in London. Each topic remains safe, perfectly appropriate, and meticulously designed to gently reveal character without dangerously venturing into anything too personal or intimate. But you are also diligently watching him, exactly as your mother had advised. When Mary enters the room to serve the tea, you notice how Thomas nods politely in her direction, a small, subtle acknowledgement that many gentlemen of his social class would completely overlook. When your father makes a rather unremarkable joke about the dreary weather, Thomas laughs. Not the forced, social chuckle of obligation, but a genuine, spontaneous amusement that truly reaches his eyes. When Mrs. Weatherby accidentally knocks over her teacup, sending a wave of hot liquid splashing across the small table, Thomas immediately rises to his feet to help, producing a clean handkerchief from his coat without even being asked. "Oh, how terribly clumsy of me," Mrs. Weatherby flutters, dabbing lightly at the spill. "Not at all," your mother soothes, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to expertly clean up the mess. These little things happen. But you observe something else entirely. When the teacup clattered suddenly to the floor, Thomas visibly flinched. Not just a normal startled response, but something much deeper. His hands tensed momentarily, and his eyes darted quickly toward the door as if he was quickly assessing an exit route. It lasted only a few seconds before he perfectly regained his composure, but you immediately filed the observation away in your memory. Something about sudden, loud noises affects him more significantly than it should. The formal portion of the entire visit lasts exactly 1 hour, as etiquette strictly dictates. Any shorter would suggest clear disinterest. Any longer would be considered deeply presumptuous. As the Weatherbys prepare to take their leave, Thomas requests a brief private word with your father. A short conversation that takes place in the hallway, just out of direct earshot but easily visible to everyone still in the parlour through the open doorway. You watch your father nod his head several times. Thomas gestures occasionally as he speaks, his hands moving with that same careful, precise quality you noticed earlier. After perhaps 5 short minutes, they formally shake hands, and your father's expression strongly suggests the conversation went very well. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas says, returning to the parlour, "with your father's kind permission, I would be truly honoured to call on you again, perhaps next Sunday afternoon, if that would be agreeable." Your heart gives a little skip. This is it, the formal, official beginning of courtship. That would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherby. After they finally depart, your mother immediately commences the post-visit analysis. "Well, he certainly seems quite respectable," she says, settling back into her chair with satisfaction. "Excellent posture, clean fingernails," politely acknowledged the servants. "And did you observe his reaction when I accidentally knocked over the tea? It shows genuine thoughtfulness. Your father then joins the conversation. Conversation? He's managed to save a substantial amount during his years working in India. He informs us it's enough to set up a home without needing aid from either family, and his career outlook with the company appears solid. But your mind keeps returning to that moment the teacup dropped, to the deliberate way Thomas moved, the slight tension visible around his eyes when he spoke of India's demanding climate. There are depths here the standard formal courtship rituals aren't designed to uncover. Sunday dawns, unusually warm for the end of May. You've chosen your second nicest gown, a pale green cotton dotted with tiny white blossoms, a shade your mother insists complements your eyes. This time there's no corset drama, no nervous start to breakfast. You're beginning to grasp the pattern of these meetings. Thomas arrives exactly at 2 o'clock, carrying a modest bunch of flowers, which is acceptable because flowers are temporary and unassuming, unlike jewellery or books, which might hint at overly serious intentions. He's dressed more casually today, in a brown jacket and lighter trousers, and seems more at ease. "Miss Hartwell," he says, presenting the flowers with a small incline of his head. "I spotted these growing in my mother's garden and hope you might like them. They are sweet peas, delicate purple and white blooms that carry the scent of spring and innocence. As you accept them, your gloved fingers brush his for a mere fraction of a second, and you feel a faint jolt, entirely unrelated to static electricity from your wool skirt. "They're beautiful," you reply, burying your face in the fragrant petals to conceal the blush you sense creeping up your cheeks. "Sweet peas are my favourite." "I had a feeling they might be," he says, and his tone suggests the choice was less spontaneous than he let on. This second visit feels different from the first. With the initial formalities completed, the exchange flows more naturally. Thomas tells you stories from his childhood, being the youngest of 4 boys, constantly striving to prove himself worthy of notice. You recount details of your schooling, the small academy where you were taught French and drawing, and just enough mathematics to handle domestic accounts. I must admit, Thomas says during an extended pause in the discussion, I find London rather overwhelming after 4 years in smaller colonial settlements. The noise, the crowds, the frantic pace of everything. Sometimes I genuinely question if I remember how to be properly English. There's a note of sincere vulnerability in this confession that catches you off guard. Gentlemen aren't typically supposed to voice uncertainty or frailty, yet here he is, acknowledging that the return home hasn't been as simple as anticipated. Perhaps, you suggest gently, it's not a matter of being properly English, but about finding the way you, specifically, are English. 4 years is a significant time. You've had experiences most of us can't begin to imagine. He looks at you with a flicker of surprise, as if he hadn't expected such insight. You are very observant, Miss Hartwell. Over the weeks that follow, the Sunday visits become customary. Thomas calls every Sunday at 2, staying for precisely the agreed-upon hour. Sometimes you sit in the drawing room. Sometimes you stroll in the small garden behind the house, always with your mother or Aunt Caroline nearby. The conversations grow deeper, more personal, though still contained within the boundaries of propriety. You learn that Thomas is troubled by nightmares, a detail he mentions vaguely when explaining his often tired look on Monday mornings. You discover that he attempts to write poetry, though he's too shy to share any with you. He tells you about the unusual foods he learned to appreciate in India, the festivals he observed, the complexity of navigating trade relationships across cultural gaps. In return, you share your own closely held thoughts. Your discontent with the limited scope of female education, your secret wish to travel, to see places far beyond London's sooty confines, your affection for novels, though you are careful not to mention the slightly risque ones borrowed from your friend Catherine. During the 4th Sunday visit, Thomas makes a request that causes your heart to race. Miss Hartwell, he says, glancing toward your mother occupied with her needlework, I wonder if you would agree to accompany me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace next Saturday? With appropriate chaperonage, of course. This is a substantial step. Attending a public function together signals a new stage of courtship, a semi-official declaration that you are formally keeping company. Your mother's embroidery needle pauses as she awaits your reply. I would be delighted, you manage to say, striving to keep your voice level despite the tremor of excitement in your chest. The Crystal Palace, rebuilt in South London after the Great Exhibition of 1851, represents all that is modern and inspiring about the Victorian era. The structure itself is a feat of iron and glass, rising from Sydenham Hill like a mythical palace crafted from light and air. Inside are elaborate gardens, powerful fountains, artifacts from around the globe, and enough wonders to occupy days of exploration. Saturday arrives, bright and clear. You are dressed in your absolute finest, a dress of rich blue silk that took your mother 6 months to save for, with a coordinating jacket and a small hat decorated with ribbons. Your gloves are immaculate white kid leather, and you carry a small beaded bag holding your handkerchief, smelling salts and a few coins. Thomas arrives with a hired carriage, an open landau that permits easy supervision while offering the thrill of travelling together. Aunt Caroline, chosen as chaperone for her severe nature and sharp observation, settles herself in the seat facing you. She wears her most disapproving expression and her most pointed hat, the one with feathers that seem to aim accusingly at anyone contemplating impropriety. The journey through London is an event in itself. The streets are thick with traffic, private carriages, omnibuses, delivery carts and horseback riders all vying for space on lanes never intended for such volume. Street vendors shout their merchandise, fresh flowers, penny a bunch, hot pies, meat pies, sweep your chimneys, soot away. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass them. the new Houses of Parliament with their Gothic spires, Westminster Abbey with its ancient stones darkened by coal smoke, the bridges crossing the Thames where barges heavy with goods await their turn at the docks. The river itself is congested with boats, steamboats emitting black smoke, sailing ships with their dense masts, and a constant procession of smaller craft ferrying people and items across the murky water. As you travel south of the river, the nature of the districts changes. Gone are the stately squares and elegant terraces of central London. Here, the homes are smaller, packed closer together, and the air carries the smell of industrial exhaust mixed with something less pleasant, the odour of too many people living in cramped conditions with insufficient sanitation. But then you ascend Sydenham Hill and suddenly the Crystal Palace appears before you, like something conjured from a dream. The immense structure catches the afternoon sun and reflects it back in 1,000 dazzling sparkles. Gardens extend in every direction, filled with exotic plant life and meticulously arranged flower beds that form complex designs when seen from the palace's elevated terraces. "It's magnificent," you breathe, momentarily forgetting to maintain your usual reserve. "Indeed it is," Thomas agrees, offering you his arm as you step down from the carriage. "Though I confess it reminds me somewhat of some of the palaces I encountered in India, this Victorian faith in iron, glass, and human ingenuity." Inside the palace, you are immediately overwhelmed by the sheer scale and diversity of everything. The central corridor stretches out seemingly endlessly, filled with elaborate fountains and foreign plants that reach high overhead. There are displays on every imaginable topic, the newest industrial machinery, collections of butterflies from across the globe, exhibits of local crafts from the furthest reaches of the British Empire, and artistic installations that merge science with beauty. Thomas guides you through the crowds, carefully ensuring your comfort. When the press of people grows too dense, he steers you towards quieter alcoves. When you pause to inspect a particularly captivating display, he waits patiently without rushing you. When Aunt Caroline announces she requires refreshment, he promptly finds a tea room where she can rest her feet. It is during this break, while Aunt Caroline is absorbed in her tea and biscuits, that Thomas leans in slightly and speaks in a voice meant only for you. "Miss Hartwell, I hope you won't consider me overly bold, but I find myself growing quite fond of these Saturday outings, and of your company." Your heart momentarily stops, then resumes beating at double speed. This borders on the territory of declarations, of serious intent. You quickly glance at Aunt Caroline, but she is thoroughly engrossed in the methodical dismantling of a currant scone. "I have enjoyed them as well," you say softly, your voice barely audible. "I had hoped," he begins, then checks himself. "That is, I wonder if you might consider—" But perhaps this is not the right setting for such discussions. You understand perfectly. He is testing the reaction, alluding to the question of engagement without actually proposing. Yet, according to all established rules, such conversations should happen first with your father, then with you, and certainly not in a public tea room with your aunt 3 feet away. "Perhaps," you reply with deliberation, "such discussions might be more appropriately held in a more private environment." The look that passes between you holds enough tension to power the palace's newest gas lights. He realises you are not rejecting his implied suit, simply suggesting the proper procedure. Relief and something deeper, anticipation, affection, flicker across his face. The rest of the afternoon rushes by in a pleasant haze. You admire tropical birds whose feathers gleam with indescribable colours. You watch demonstrations of new photography methods that can capture a person's likeness in mere minutes, not hours. You sample exotic fruits whose flavours briefly transport you to distant lands you'll likely never visit. But beneath all the excitement and wonder, a deeper current flows between you and Thomas, a sense of impending change, of decisions that will entirely reshape your future. By the time you arrive back home, as the sun descends over London's smoky skyline, you know that everything is on the verge of shifting. Tuesday evening arrives with a thunderstorm that shakes the window panes and sends heavy rain sheeting against the glass. You are in the parlour with your mother working on your embroidery by lamplight when the front doorbell rings. It's well past 8 o'clock, far too late for social calls, so when Mary appears in the doorway looking flustered, you immediately know something important is happening. "Begging your pardon, ma'am," Mary says to your mother, "but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is at the door, says he needs to speak with the master urgently." Your mother's eyebrows nearly touch her hairline. Your father emerges from his study, newspaper still in hand, looking equally perplexed. Through the parlour window you can see Thomas's hired carriage waiting in the rain, the horse stamping restlessly as water streams from its mane. "Show him into the study," your father instructs after a moment of consideration. "Eleanor, you and your mother remain here." Of course you strain to catch every sound from across the hall, the low, serious murmur of the male voices, your father's occasional "indeed," and Thomas's longer answers that you can't quite make out. The discussion lasts almost 20 minutes, an eternity when you are seated with your embroidery hoop forgotten in your lap, your heart beating quickly enough to make the cameo brooch on your collar tremble. Finally, footsteps approach the parlour. Your father enters alone, but his expression tells the whole story before he speaks. "Eleanor," he says, and there is satisfaction in his voice, mixed with what might be relief. "Mr. Weatherby has requested permission to pay his addresses to you. I have granted my consent." The embroidery hoop slips from your numb fingers and hits the floor with a soft thud. This is it. Thomas intends to marry you. After 6 weeks of careful courtship, he is ready to formalise it. "He wishes to speak with you tomorrow afternoon," your father continues. "I instructed him to call at 2 o'clock. Your mother will be present, naturally, but he'll be allowed to make his proposal directly to you." Your mother lets out a small, sharp gasp of excitement that she immediately attempts to stifle. "Oh, Eleanor, we must decide what you'll wear, and we should have cook prepare something special, and perhaps we should move the good china from the cabinet to—" "Mother?" you interrupt gently, though your own excitement is causing your hands to shake slightly. Perhaps we should wait to see what he has to say first. But you already know what Thomas will say. The question isn't whether he will propose, it's whether you are truly prepared to accept him. Marriage in 1855 isn't a casual commitment you can easily leave if things don't work out. Once you say yes, your legal existence essentially dissolves. Your assets become his, your money becomes his. Even your children, should you have them, belong legally to him rather than to you. Yet what real alternative do you have? At 22, you are nearing the age where people will begin to hint at you being past your prime. Your family cannot afford to support you indefinitely, and Thomas appears kind, intelligent, and genuinely fond of you. In an era where many marriages are purely transactional, the possibility of affection feels like extraordinary good fortune. Wednesday progresses with agonizing slowness. You change outfits 3 times before settling on a dress of soft grey wool with violet trim, serious enough to show you respect the gravity of the occasion, but pretty enough to remind Thomas why he's proposing in the first place. Your hair resists cooperation, and Mary has to pin and repin the complex braided style twice before it holds correctly. Precisely at 2 o'clock, Thomas arrives carrying a small velvet box that makes your stomach clench nervously. He is wearing his best black coat and a freshly laundered white shirt with a collar so starched it looks like it might slice his throat if he turns his head incorrectly. His hands are trembling just slightly as he removes his gloves. "Miss Hartwell," he says formally, though his eyes are kind. "Mrs. Hartwell." He nods to your mother, who has positioned herself in the corner chair with her needlework, close enough to supervise but distant enough to offer the pretense of privacy. You sit on the edge of the settee, back straight, hands folded in your lap. Thomas takes the chair across from you. The same arrangement as those initial visits, but now everything feels different, charged, final. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas begins, then pauses and takes a deep breath. "Oh, if I may, I have spoken with your father, and with your permission, I would like to speak directly to your heart." This is the moment everything transforms. You nod, unable to trust your voice. "These past weeks of knowing you have been among the happiest of my life," he continues, his voice gaining steadiness. "Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength of character, all of these qualities have made me realize that I cannot envision my future without you in it." He slides from his chair to one knee beside the settee, the velvet box now prominently displayed in his hands. "Eleanor Hartwell, would you do me the immense honour of becoming my wife?" The ring inside the box is modest but lovely, a small diamond surrounded by tiny pearls set in yellow gold. It's neither flashy nor ostentatious, but it was clearly chosen with care and represents a significant expenditure for a man in Thomas's position. "Yes," you whisper, then find your voice. "Yes, Thomas, I would be honoured to accept." His relief is so obvious that you almost laugh. He takes your left hand in his, the first time you've touched without gloves, and slides the ring onto your fourth finger. His hands are warm and slightly rough, likely from his years overseas, and the touch sends a small shiver up your arm. "There," he says softly. "Now it's official." From her corner, your mother makes a small sound that might be a suppressed sob of happiness. When you look over, she is dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief while attempting to appear engrossed in her embroidery. The remainder of the visit passes in a whirlwind of practical discussions. The engagement will be formally announced in next Sunday's paper. The wedding will take place in 6 months, allowing you time to prepare a trousseau and Thomas time to secure proper accommodation. He's found a small house in Kensington, 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a tiny garden that will be available to rent come autumn. "I know it's not grand," Thomas says, his voice slightly apologetic, "but it's respectable, and it's near enough to my office that I can walk to work in good weather." "It sounds perfect," you assure him, and you genuinely mean it. The prospect of having your own household, your own space to arrange as you please, feels like the most luxurious thing imaginable. After Thomas departs, your mother immediately commences what she calls engagement planning. Lists appear overnight. What needs to be purchased, what needs to be sewn, which relatives need to be informed. The next few months will be a blur of preparation unlike anything you've ever experienced. But first, there are the immediate changes that come with being officially engaged. Starting the very next Sunday, Thomas is permitted to take you on unchaperoned walks. The first time you step out together without your mother trailing behind feels like the most audacious thing you've ever done. You walk slowly through the small park near your home, your hand resting lightly on Thomas's arm, marvelling at this newfound freedom. For the first time in your courtship, you can speak without weighing every word for appropriateness under parental supervision. "I confess," Thomas says as you pause beside a fountain where children are sailing toy boats, "I've been terrified for weeks that you might refuse me." "Were you really?" you ask, surprised. "But surely you could tell that I enjoyed your visits." "Enjoyed them, yes. But enjoyment and willingness to marry are quite different things." He adjusts his grip on his walking stick. "I know I'm not the most thrilling prospect, no title, no great fortune, and I come with some complications from my time abroad." You recall those moments when sudden loud noises made him jump, the precise way he sometimes held himself, as if anticipating pain. Everyone has complications, Thomas. The important thing is whether 2 people can face them together. He stops walking and looks at you with an expression you can't quite interpret. "You're very wise for someone so young." "I'm not that young," you protest. 22 is quite grown up. "Of course it is," he says quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest that. I sometimes feel much older than my 26 years. India has a way of aging a person." Over the following weeks, these unchaperoned walks become precious to both of you. Away from the formal constraints of parlour visits, Thomas begins to reveal more of his true self. He tells you about the fever that almost killed him during his second year in Bombay, about the colleague who cheated him out of a promotion, about the profound, overwhelming relief he felt when the ship carrying him home finally cleared the harbour. You share your own secrets in return, your fear that you're not naturally maternal enough to be a good mother, your frustration with the restrictions placed on women's education, your private dream of learning to paint with real talent, not just the watercolour dabbling considered suitable for ladies. Perhaps, Thomas suggests, one afternoon as you sit on a bench watching sparrows hop around your feet, you could take proper painting lessons after we're married. We won't be wealthy, but we should be comfortable enough for small luxuries. The casual way he says, "after we're married," makes your stomach flutter. It's becoming tangible, this future you are planning together. Along with the walks come other new privileges. Thomas is now allowed to visit you in the front parlour without formal supervision, though he is still required to depart before nightfall. During these visits, you are permitted to hold hands, a simple intimacy that feels utterly revolutionary after months of careful distance. The first time Thomas takes your hand in his, you are sitting on the settee looking through a book of engravings he's brought to show you, scenes from India. His fingers intertwine with yours, warm and slightly calloused, and you're amazed by how natural it feels. "Is this proper?" you ask, though you make no attempt to pull away. "Perfectly proper for an engaged couple," he assures you, though I admit it feels rather scandalous after all those weeks of keeping my hands to myself. You laugh, and the sound seems to surprise both of you. It's been a long time since you laughed so freely in Thomas's presence. Most of your interactions have been so cautious, so deliberate, but engagement has brought a new ease to your relationship. The letters begin arriving the very week of your engagement. According to Victorian custom, engaged couples are expected to write to each other frequently, especially when separated by business or family obligations. Thomas's work requires him to travel to the company's offices in Manchester for a week, and suddenly you are learning to articulate your feelings on paper. "My dear Eleanor," his first letter begins, "I have been gone only 2 days, yet I find myself missing our conversations more than I had expected. Manchester is a bustling city, full of the noise and smoke of industry, but I confess I would exchange all its energy for another quiet walk through your neighbourhood park." You spend an entire evening composing your reply, filling 3 pages with your own neat handwriting. You tell him about the books you are reading, the alterations your mother is making to the house in anticipation of the wedding, the small daily occurrences that feel significant when shared with someone who cares about them. These letters become the bedrock of your deepening relationship. In writing, Thomas is more articulate than in person, less constrained by the formal requirements of polite conversation. He writes about his aspirations for your marriage, his plans for the house in Kensington, his gradual readjustment to English life after his years abroad. You discover that you, too, express yourself more freely in writing. You tell him about your worries as well as your hopes, your questions about what married life will truly involve, your excitement about having a home of your own to manage. The exchange of gifts begins in earnest too. Beyond the engagement ring, Thomas presents you with a small locket containing his photograph, a formal portrait, showing him in his best coat, looking serious and slightly younger than his actual age. You reciprocate with your own photograph, taken at a studio in town, wearing your best dress and your most composed expression. But the most intimate gift is yet to come. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in July, Thomas appears at your door carrying a small wrapped package. "This is rather unconventional," he says, looking slightly self-conscious as he hands it to you. "But I thought you might appreciate it." Inside the package is a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. But what makes it truly special is the inscription on the first page, written in Thomas's careful script. "For Eleanor, to record all the thoughts too precious for ordinary conversation." You run your fingers over the smooth leather cover, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful, Thomas. Thank you." "I have one just like it," he admits. "I thought perhaps we might both keep journals during our engagement. Not to share, necessarily, but to help us process all the changes ahead." That night, alone in your bedroom, you make the first entry in your new journal. You write about the strange mix of excitement and apprehension that comes with approaching marriage, about your growing affection for Thomas, about the overwhelming nature of all the decisions that need to be made. The summer passes in a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Your mother drags you to endless fittings for your wedding gown and the new clothes that will form your married wardrobe. The dress itself is an extravagant creation of white silk and Brussels lace that cost more than your father's shop earns in 2 months, but it's considered vital for maintaining the family's social standing. You spend afternoons learning household management skills that your education had only touched upon. Cook teaches you to plan menus and manage food expenses. Mary shows you the proper care of fine linens and the best techniques for removing different kinds of stains. Your mother drills you on the social obligations you'll face as a married woman, which neighbours to call upon, how to supervise servants, the correct way to host a dinner party. But perhaps the most crucial education comes from the married women in your family and social circle. Your Aunt Margaret, who has been married for 15 years, pulls you aside for a series of discussions that no one else seems willing to have. Marriage, she tells you candidly, is not what the novels make it out to be. There will be wonderful moments, certainly, but there will also be difficult ones. Your husband will have moods you don't understand. You'll have days when you question what you've gotten yourself into. The vital thing is to remember that building a life together requires time and patience. She pauses, studying your face. And Eleanor, there are aspects of married life that no one discusses openly, but that you need to understand. The physical aspects. Your face burns with embarrassment, but you force yourself to listen as Aunt Margaret explains in careful euphemisms what will be expected of you as a wife. It's not the romantic ideal painted by the poetry you've read, but it's practical information you desperately need. As summer yields to autumn, your wedding date approaches with alarming speed. The house in Kensington has been secured, and Thomas takes you to see it on a crisp September afternoon. It's smaller than your family home, but bright and welcoming, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a garden just large enough for a small vegetable patch. The kitchen is modern, Thomas points out, opening cabinets to show off the built-in storage. And there's a proper range for cooking, not just an open hearth. You run your hands over the wooden countertops, imagining yourself preparing meals here, managing your own household. The excitement is a blend of elation and dread. It's perfect, you assure him, and genuinely mean it. This place will be your exclusive space, your charge, your sanctuary. Just a fortnight before the ceremony, Thomas makes a singular plea. He asks if you would consider offering him a clipping of your hair to keep, a keepsake he can always possess. It's a frequent token among couples about to marry, yet the gesture still feels profoundly private. You sit before your mirrored dressing table as Mary meticulously snips a fine section of hair from behind your ear where its absence won't be noticed. The dark strands feel supple and vibrant in your palm as you carefully fold them into tissue paper for Thomas. A fragment of me to always carry, you mention to Mary as you seal the small package. In return, Thomas gives you a curl of his own hair, already preserved meticulously inside a modest silver locket. "Something that is mine to hold near your heart," he states simply. The week preceding your marriage arrives amidst a flurry of final arrangements. Family members arrive at your residence like a benevolent invasion. Your wedding garment hangs in your wardrobe, a lovely phantom of your future identity. Your trousseau, the linens, clothes, and household articles you'll contribute to your union, fills a pair of large chests resting at the foot of your bed. Thomas now calls every day, sometimes twice, both to verify the details and simply to see you. The stiff formality of your initial courtship has softened into real affection and an easy, shared life. You find yourself looking forward to being married not merely as a required progression, but as an adventure you wish to experience with this particular person. On the Thursday before your Saturday ceremony, Thomas takes your hands in the parlour and looks at you with grave sincerity. "Eleanor," he begins, "I need you to know that regardless of the trials we face as a couple, I will always strive to be worthy of the faith you are investing in me, and I will strive to be worthy of yours," you reply, every word true. Outside, London hums with its characteristic energy. Carriages rumble by, merchants hawk their wares, the steady background noise of a city that never completely pauses its motion. But right now, in your family's parlour, with Thomas's hand securely holding yours, the future seems both certain and rich with wonderful prospects. Saturday morning arrives dreary and damp, the sort of London weather that makes everything resemble a watercolour left to smear in the rain. You awaken just before daybreak in your childhood bedroom for the very last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house gradually stirring into activity below. The cook is already clattering pots 3 floors down in the kitchen, and you can hear the measured steps of your father as he paces the library, likely practicing the toast he will offer at the wedding breakfast. Your bridal dress is draped over the wardrobe door like a glowing spectre, the white lace and silk catching the sparse light filtering through the rain-streaked window panes. In a few hours you will put it on and become Mrs. Thomas Weatherby, exchanging your name as Eleanor Hartwell for an entirely new existence. Mary appears with your breakfast service, but the usual heavy oatmeal has been swapped for delicate toast triangles and weak tea. Your mother's acknowledgement that your anxious stomach is unlikely to tolerate a more substantial meal. Your hands tremble slightly as you raise the teacup, and you notice Mary observing you with an expression somewhere between excitement and understanding. "Concerned, miss?" she asks quietly, starting to lay out your underclothing. "Terrified." "Utterly terrified," you confess, then instantly feel regretful for admitting it. Young women are expected to embrace marriage with only delight and eager anticipation, not a knot of gut-churning anxiety, but Mary simply nods knowingly. "That's perfectly normal, miss." My sister said the very same thing on her wedding morning. She said she felt as though she was about to step off a precipice without knowing what lay beneath. The comparison is not exactly comforting, yet there is solace in knowing that other women have endured this same mix of anticipation and sheer panic. Your mother breezes in soon after breakfast, already dressed in her finest gown of rich purple silk, a colour that indicates her position as mother of the bride while remaining suitably reserved. Close behind her come Aunt Caroline, your cousin Margaret, and Mrs. Patterson from next door, all carrying pins, ribbon, and strong opinions about the proper way your hair should be styled. The lengthy process of getting dressed takes almost 3 hours. First, the chemise, a thin cotton layer that feels like almost nothing against your skin. Then the corset, fastened tighter than normal to create the perfect silhouette for your gown. Today, Mary pulls the laces until drawing a full breath is barely possible, but you offer no complaint. On your wedding day, minor discomfort is simply a prerequisite for beauty. Next comes the bustle, larger than your daily one, and designed to support the great length of your bridal dress's train. 3 crinolines follow, each one adding volume and weight until you feel as if you are wearing a small tent. By the time the main dress is finally lowered over your head, you are already weary from the sheer physical effort of wearing all these layers. But when Mary secures the last pearl button and moves back, the reflection in your mirror steals your breath away. The woman looking back is sophisticated, graceful, beautiful in a way that your ordinary self never manages to achieve. The gown transforms you into someone worthy of a proper Victorian ceremony. Your hair has been styled elaborately, with white silk blossoms woven throughout the curls and braids. A sheer veil of Brussels lace, borrowed from your grandmother's wedding ensemble, falls from a tiny tiara that catches the light from the lamps. Your only jewellery is Thomas's engagement ring, and a simple strand of pearls inherited from your mother. "You look like an angel," your mother whispers, her eyes welling up with tears she struggles hard to keep from falling. The carriage ride to St. George's Church feels both unending and far too quick. Your father sits beside you, unusually quiet, occasionally reaching out to pat your gloved hand reassuringly. Through the windows speckled with rain, you watch London continue with its usual Saturday rhythm. Street vendors are still shouting out their goods, children leap over puddles, the steady flow of life that will proceed exactly as it always has, even as your entire existence is poised to change. The church looms ahead. Its stone exterior is dark from years of coal dust, yet still imposing in its Gothic scale. Carriages line the street outside, and you can see guests hurrying through the downpour, their umbrellas forming a black silk canopy. Your father helps you step down from the carriage, careful not to snag your train, and suddenly you are standing in the church entrance, with rain drumming on the roof above and the scent of damp wool and ancient stone filling your senses. Through the massive oak doors, you can hear the soft murmuring of voices as people take their seats. "Ready, my dear?" your father asks, offering his arm. You nod, unwilling to trust your own voice, and the heavy doors slowly swing inward. The church is filled. More guests than you had anticipated, with faces both familiar and unfamiliar, turned towards you with that unique mix of sentimentality and curiosity that weddings inspire. Candles flicker in the muted morning light, casting swaying shadows on the massive stone walls. The organist begins the processional music, and suddenly you are gliding down the aisle on your father's arm, your train rustling gently behind you like dried leaves. But all you can truly see is Thomas standing at the altar in his finest black coat, his hands clasped behind him. When your eyes meet his, he smiles. Not the formal, social smile you had grown accustomed to, but one that is warmer and deeply personal, suggesting that this is not just an obligatory event or a public display, but the beginning of something truly genuine between the two of you. The ceremony itself is a swift succession of time-honoured language and ritual responses. You hear yourself promising to honour, love, and obey, to commit yourself to Thomas, abandoning all others, to accept him as your wedded husband until separated by death. The seriousness of these vows settles on your shoulders like a weighty garment, but when Thomas slides his mother's gold wedding ring onto your finger, his hands are steady and warm. "I now declare you man and wife," the rector announces, and just like that, it is final. You are married. You now legally and socially belong to Thomas, and in every other way that matters in Victorian society. The kiss Thomas gives you is quick and modest, appropriate for a church full of onlookers, but you feel the anticipation of more intimate moments in the tender pressure of his mouth against yours. When you turn to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, the world looks subtly different than it did only an hour before. The wedding breakfast takes place at your family residence, which has been beautifully transformed for the celebration. The large dining table groans under the weight of an elaborate feast. Roasted poultry, ham glazed with honey, fresh bread still warm from the baker, custards and jellies, and a triple-tiered cake adorned with sugar flowers that look nearly real enough to smell. But you can barely eat, caught between the tight lacing of your corset and the nervous energy that has not yet left you. You sip champagne, a rare indulgence that makes your head feel pleasantly light and floaty, and smile until your cheeks hurt as guests offer their congratulations and advice. Uncle William, slightly flushed from his own generous encounter with the champagne, insists on delivering an impromptu speech on the sanctity of marriage and the responsibilities of a wife. Aunt Margaret entertains you with recollections from the start of her own marriage, most of which involve domestic failures and comical misunderstandings that are funny in hindsight, but probably were not at the time. Thomas remains close by your side throughout the reception, occasionally touching your hand or whispering reassuring words. When the social obligations become too much, you notice how he deftly redirects the more intrusive questions about your honeymoon trip and future intentions, protecting your privacy even amidst the celebration. As the afternoon progresses and the guests gradually begin to leave, the reality of what awaits you next starts to sink in. Tonight, you will sleep in your new home as Thomas's wife. The physical closeness that Aunt Margaret vaguely hinted at will become a reality. The abstract idea of marriage will become the daily domestic reality with this man you have only known for a few months. By 5 o'clock, the last of the guests have gone, leaving behind a house that resembles a post-party battlefield, crumpled napkins, empty glasses, chairs pushed out of place. Your mother's already instructing the staff in the clean-up, but her gaze keeps returning to you with a combination of pride and something that might be worry. "It is time to change into your travelling dress," she says gently, and suddenly your throat constricts with unshed emotion. The travelling dress is practical dark green wool with a matching jacket, designed for the carriage ride to your new residence and the start of your life together. As Mary unlaces your wedding gown for the final time, you feel as though you are shedding one identity and stepping into another. Your father loads your trunks into Thomas's rented carriage while your mother fusses over last-minute details. Do you have your reticule? Your gloves? The small bag of personal items you will need for tonight? Each query seems loaded with a significance you are not quite prepared to examine. The goodbyes are more difficult than you had anticipated. Your parents stand on the front steps, your mother now crying openly, your father striving for stoic composure but not fully succeeding. This house has been your entire world for 22 years, and now you're leaving it for good. "Write to us quickly," your mother calls out as the carriage begins to move. "And remember what I shared with you about being a good partner." Thomas takes your hand as the familiar streets of your youth fade from view. "Are you feeling all right?" he asks softly. "I think so," you reply, though you are far from certain. "It's just. Everything is different now." "Yes," he agrees. "But different can be a good thing, can't it?" The house in Kensington appears smaller than you remembered, but it is welcoming in the dim evening light. Smoke drifts from the chimney, suggesting that Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper Thomas hired, has been preparing for your arrival. The small front garden is orderly, with late-blooming blue roses that smell sweet despite the earlier rain. Thomas helps you out of the carriage, and you note how carefully he guides you up the front steps as if you were fragile. The front door opens before you reach it, revealing Mrs. Davies, a pleasant-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes and greying hair. "Welcome home, Mrs. Weatherby," she says, and the title sounds unfamiliar in your ears. You are Mrs. Weatherby now. Eleanor Hartwell no longer exists. The house has been readied for your arrival with obvious care. Fresh flowers are placed in the front parlour, a fire burns cheerfully in the hearth, and the scent of something appetising drifts from the kitchen. Mrs. Davies leads you through rooms that are now your responsibility to manage and arrange, explaining the routine she has established and asking about your preferences for the daily schedule and meals. Your bedroom, now shared with Thomas, overlooks the small garden at the back. The bed is larger than the one in your childhood room, with a white bedspread that looks crisp and inviting. Your trunks have already been brought up and sit waiting to be unpacked, full of the trousseau items you spent months collecting. Thomas hovers hesitantly in the doorway, suddenly appearing as nervous as you feel. "I will leave you to it," he says. Mrs. Davies has prepared supper for 7 o'clock, if that works for you. After he leaves, you sink into the small chair near the window and finally permit yourself to feel the full weight of the day's events. You are married. You are in your own residence. Tonight you will share that bed with a man who was essentially a stranger half a year ago. Mrs. Davies appears with a tea tray and offers to help you unpack, but you find yourself wanting a few moments of peace to process everything that has occurred. She seems to understand, bustling away with promises to call you when supper is ready. Dinner is served in the small dining room by candlelight, just the two of you at opposite ends of a table that feels simultaneously intimate and formal. Mrs. Davies has prepared roasted chicken with vegetables from the garden, and everything tastes delicious, even though your appetite has not quite returned. Thomas shares the arrangements he has made for your first week of married life. No visitors, no social obligations, just time for you both to become accustomed to living together. He has taken a leave of absence from his work, an unusual choice that shows how seriously he views this transition. "I thought we could spend tomorrow arranging the books in the library," he suggests, over the custard dessert, "and perhaps you'd like to see the kitchen properly to discuss the menu planning with Mrs. Davies." These ordinary domestic details feel both comforting and a little overwhelming. This is what marriage truly is. Not the sweeping passion of fiction or the drama of wedding rituals, but the daily task of sharing a life with another person. After dinner, you sit together in the parlour, Thomas reading aloud from the evening paper while you try to concentrate on your needlework. But the domestic quiet feels precarious, underscored by your awareness of what is expected to happen when you retire for the night. At 9 o'clock, Mrs. Davies appears to bank the fires and secure the house for the night. She wishes you both a good evening with a meaningful glance that makes your face flush. And suddenly you are alone with your husband in your new home. "Eleanor," Thomas says softly, setting aside his paper, "I want you to know that is. I realise this is all quite new for you. We don't have to. That is, there is absolutely no rush for anything to happen quickly." His consideration touches you deeply, even as it underscores the oddness of your situation. You share enough history to feel a genuine bond, but not enough to easily navigate a physical relationship without awkwardness. "Thank you," you whisper. "That truly means a lot to me." When you finally go upstairs together, Thomas shows you the small dressing room where he will change into his night clothes, giving you privacy to prepare for bed alone. In the bedroom, you swap your travelling dress for the fine cotton nightgown from your trousseau, then sit at the dressing table to brush your hair. In the mirror, you watch yourself perform this nightly routine in a new place. The woman looking back is the same as always, but everything surrounding her has changed. This is now your room, your mirror, your bed, your life. When Thomas returns wearing a nightshirt and dressing gown, you are perched on the edge of the bed, feeling uncertain and shy. He moves respectfully, carefully, settling onto the far side of the bed, leaving space between you. "Eleanor," he says quietly, "I meant what I said downstairs. We have our entire lives to figure this out together." You turn to face him in the soft light from the bedside candle. His hair is slightly mussed, his expression serious but gentle. "This is your husband. This patient, kind man is yours now, and you are his." "I know," you say, "and I am grateful for your understanding." He reaches across the distance between you and takes your hand. The same gesture that felt so new during your engagement now carrying an even deeper significance. "We're going to." to be fine, aren't we?" he asks, and you detect the uncertainty beneath his confident tone. "Yes," you say, and find that you actually believe it. "We're going to be all right." The first days of marriage unfold in a blur of small discoveries and domestic adjustment. You learn that Thomas prefers his coffee strong and unsweetened, that he hums without realising it while he shaves, that he sometimes murmurs in his sleep, usually reciting figures and dates from his work accounts. He discovers that you are not naturally an early riser, that you hold strong opinions about how books should be categorised, and that you create the most lovely flower arrangements he has ever seen. Mrs. Davies proves invaluable in helping you establish your role as the mistress of the house. She instructs you on planning menus that balance the budget with good nutrition, managing the household finances, and overseeing the cleaning and maintenance schedules. Running even a small home is more complicated than you had expected, but deeply satisfying in ways you had not foreseen. You write your first letter as a married woman to your parents, describing your new house and how you are settling in. The signature, your daughter, Eleanor Weatherby, looks peculiar on the page, but less so each time you write it. Thomas returns to his office after a week, leaving you alone in the house with Mrs. Davies and your own thoughts. The solitude feels both liberating and slightly overwhelming. For the first time in your life, you are responsible for structuring your own days without teachers, parents, or social obligations to guide you. You spend the morning shifting the parlour furniture to better capture the light from the windows. After lunch, you walk to the nearby shops to introduce yourself to the local merchants as Mrs. Weatherby of Elsewhere Street. The grocer, the baker, the fishmonger all treat you with the respect due a respectable married woman, and you begin to grasp the social weight that accompanies your new status. When Thomas returns that evening, you have prepared dinner yourself, a simple meal, but one cooked with your own hands in your own kitchen. The pride on his face when you tell him makes the effort worthwhile. "You are becoming quite the homemaker," he says, and there is an admiration in his voice that makes your heart skip. "I am still learning," you reply. "Mrs. Davies is a patient instructor." As the weeks pass, you settle into the rhythm of your shared life. Thomas leaves for his office each morning after breakfast, returning in the evening with stories about his colleagues and the challenges of adjusting back to English business practices after his years abroad. You fill your days with household oversight, correspondence with family and friends, and the slowly increasing social obligations that accompany your new status as a married woman. The physical intimacy that seemed so frightening on your wedding night develops slowly, naturally, as you grow more comfortable with one another. Thomas is gentle and patient, and you discover that the mysterious parts of marriage that no one talks about directly are not as terrifying as you had imagined. Your first formal dinner party as a married couple takes place 6 weeks after the wedding. 3 other couples carefully selected from the neighbourhood for their social compatibility and respectability. You spend days planning the menu with Mrs. Davies, polishing the fine china and arranging flowers throughout the house. The evening is a success. Conversation flows easily. The food is complimented and you receive several kind words about your hostessing ability. After the guests leave, you and Thomas sit in the parlour enjoying the satisfaction of a successful social debut. "You were magnificent tonight," Thomas tells you, loosening his collar after hours of formal courtesy. "I was so proud watching you manage everything with such grace." "Were you truly?" you ask, still warm from the evening's success. "Absolutely. You are going to be a wonderful addition to Kensington society." As autumn deepens into winter, you realise that you have successfully made the transition from daughter to wife, from girl to woman. The anxieties that felt so overwhelming on your wedding morning have mostly disappeared, replaced by the comforting routine of a shared domestic life. You still occasionally miss your childhood home, still sometimes feel overwhelmed by the responsibilities of managing your own household, but you have also discovered unexpected joys. The satisfaction of establishing a home that reflects your own taste, the the pleasure of having time to pursue interests like music and painting without parental supervision. The growing affection between you and Thomas as you navigate daily life together. One snowy evening in December, as you sit by the fire with your embroidery while Thomas reads his newspaper, you realise how completely your life has changed in only a few months. The nervous young woman who waited in her parents' parlour for Thomas Weatherby's first visit seems like a completely different person. "Thomas," you say softly, putting aside your needlework. He looks up from his paper, the lamplight catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I simply wanted to say that I am happy. Truly happy." His smile spreads slowly across his face, transforming his serious expression into something boyish and warm. "So am I, my dear. So am I." Outside, London is quiet beneath its blanket of snow, but inside your small Kensington house, you have built something valuable together, a life that is entirely your own. Spring arrives early in 1856, bringing with it a soft warmth that makes London's sooty buildings look almost beautiful. You are in your garden, kneeling among the emerging daffodils, with sunshine warming your shoulders through your cottonwork dress and dirt under your fingernails. This is a kind of freedom you never had as an unmarried woman, the simple joy of getting your hands dirty in your own soil. Thomas finds you there when he returns from work, looking delighted rather than shocked by your dishevelled appearance. "You look as though you've been grappling with the earth and succeeding," he says, settling down beside you on the small wooden bench he constructed last month. The roses required pruning, and Mrs. Davies mentioned that the vegetable patch could use some care. You explain, wiping your hands on the old apron you've started wearing for gardening. "I found I quite enjoy it. This is one of the unanticipated pleasures of being married, the liberty to develop interests that might have been considered unsuitable for an unmarried woman. Your painting has improved significantly now that you can afford to hire a proper tutor rather than relying on the superficial instruction deemed appropriate for young ladies. You have also begun reading novels that would have been forbidden in your parents' home, discussing them with Thomas over dinner like intellectual equals. "I have news," Thomas says, leaning back against the bench, with the satisfied look of a man bringing good tidings. "Peterson is retiring at the close of the year, and I am being considered for his role. It would mean a very substantial increase in salary." Your heart leaps with excitement. Peterson's position would make Thomas a senior clerk with true prospects for future promotion and responsibility. More importantly, it would provide the financial security to begin thinking about expanding your little household. "Thomas, that is marvellous. Do you believe you will get it?" The manager appeared encouraging, he says, trying to contain his optimism, but not quite succeeding. He noted that my experience in India gives me an advantage over the other candidates. Over dinner that evening, you discuss what Peterson's promotion could mean for your future. A larger home, perhaps, with space for the children you both desire. The ability to hire extra help for Mrs. Davies. Perhaps even a small carriage of your own instead of depending on hired vehicles for longer trips. But you have also learned to value what you currently have. The intimacy of your small home where every room holds memories you have created together. The satisfaction of managing your own domestic world. The way Thomas's face brightens when he comes home to find you waiting with stories about your day. The approach of your first autumn wedding anniversary makes you pause, struck by the complete transformation of your existence. The nervous girl who struggled for air in her wedding stays is now a self-assured woman, expertly managing her home, keeping up her own social connections, and navigating the emotional and physical intricacies of being married with growing ease. Your anniversary celebration unfolds in quiet perfection. Dinner is at home using your finest china and flowers you picked from the garden, followed by an evening spent at the theatre, watching a comedy that leaves both of you with aching sides from laughter. Later, walking back through the gaslit streets, your hand nestled firmly in Thomas's arm, You realise that somewhere along the journey, the careful affection of your engagement matured into something deeper, more sustaining than you'd first expected. Do you ever reflect on how we first met, you ask, stopping beneath a street lamp to watch the golden glow it casts on the fallen autumn leaves? Often, Thomas admits. I remember thinking you looked absolutely petrified that very first afternoon. I was worried you might actually pass out. I was terrified. You laugh. I had never before spoken to a man I wasn't related to without my mother hovering just a few feet away. And then there you were, asking me about my reading and truly listening to what I had to say, listening to your answers. You were the first woman I had met who spoke to me as a person rather than simply a potential husband, he says, his voice taking on a serious tone. Most of the other young ladies I was introduced to seemed far more interested in my financial prospects than in me. This honesty is another gift of being married, the freedom to speak openly about feelings and past events that social norms would never have permitted during the time of your courtship. You've discovered that Thomas still occasionally wakes from terrible dreams about his service in India, and that he sometimes struggles with a deep melancholy during the gloomy winter months in London. He has learned that you possess a quick temper when genuinely provoked, that you are sometimes stubbornly independent regarding decisions about the household, and that you will occasionally cry while reading novels even when you know the characters are completely fictional. These imperfections, rather than lessening your affection, have, in a strange way, only deepened it. Love, you've come to realise, is not the dramatic passion found in romance novels, but the steady comfort that comes from being truly known by another human being. Winter soon brings its own unexpected trials. When Thomas is struck down by a fever that confines him to bed for nearly 2 weeks, you experience for the first time the genuine fear that comes with true partnership, the terrifying recognition that your own happiness now depends entirely on another person's health. You nurse him yourself, politely declining Mrs. Davies's offers to take over the more unpleasant aspects of sick care. You sit faithfully by his bedside, reading aloud when he is conscious, checking his temperature repeatedly throughout the night and carefully preparing the special broths and teas that the doctor prescribed. When the fever finally breaks and Thomas's eyes clearly focus on your face for the first time in days, you grasp something fundamental about the vows you spoke in that flower-filled church. "Hello, wife," he whispers, his voice still ragged but unmistakably himself again. "Hello, husband," you reply, the profound relief in your voice surprising both of you. His recovery is slow but steady, and during the long afternoons when he is well enough to sit up, but not strong enough for normal activities, you spend hours talking about things you had never discussed before, his childhood fears and dreams, his experiences during the ocean voyage to India, the deep homesickness that almost overwhelmed him during his first few months abroad, and the different futures you both had imagined before you met each other. "I used to imagine I might remain unmarried," you confess one dreary February afternoon, as you mend one of his shirts beside his chair, becoming one of those independent women who travel and write books and shock the neighbours. "You still could," Thomas says softly. "Write books, I mean. You always have such thoughtful insights about everything you read." The suggestion genuinely startles you. Writing books is simply not done by respectable women, unless it's for moral instruction or simple children's stories. But the idea plants itself firmly in your mind like a seed, waiting for the proper conditions to finally germinate. When spring returns, it brings Thomas's promotion and the corresponding increase in salary. You celebrate by taking a week's holiday in Brighton, your first trip together since the wedding. The seaside town is fashionable with young couples like yourselves, and you delight in the novelty of being tourists together, exploring the long pier and the shops, and walking along the beach, where the vast ocean stretches endlessly toward France. It is during this vacation that you realise you are most likely expecting your first child. The signs are still very subtle. A slight queasiness in the mornings, unusual tiredness, a new sensitivity to certain scents that you've never experienced before. You decide to wait until you are completely certain before sharing the news with Thomas, but the very possibility adds a new golden edge to everything you see and do. Back in London, Dr. Matthews confirms your suspicion with the kind of gentle congratulations that doctors reserve for respectable married women. You are approximately 2 months along, he estimates, which means the baby should arrive sometime in early winter. That evening you break the news to Thomas over dinner, watching his expression shift from confusion to sudden understanding to a joy so pure it makes your own throat tighten with emotion. "A baby," he says, as if testing the words out loud. Our baby, you confirm, and suddenly you are both crying and laughing at the exact same moment. The pregnancy changes everything and nothing simultaneously. Your daily routines continue much as they always have, but now every single decision is made with consideration for the child growing inside you. Mrs. Davies immediately begins preparing the small room next to your bedroom to serve as a nursery. Thomas becomes almost comically overprotective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a simple teacup and worrying whenever you are out of his sight for more than a single hour. Your mother now visits more frequently, full of endless advice about managing pregnancy and preparing for motherhood. Some of it is helpful. Some of it consists of old wives' tales that Mrs. Davies quietly contradicts. But you appreciate the connection to the long line of women who have navigated this mysterious transformation before you. The physical changes are gradual at first, then increasingly obvious as summer progresses. Your dresses require careful alteration to accommodate your expanding waistline. You develop strange cravings for foods you've never particularly enjoyed and sudden strong aversions to smells that never bothered you before. The deep exhaustion of early pregnancy gives way to a period of remarkable energy, followed by the increasing unwieldiness of your final months. Thomas adapts to each stage with patient and loving consideration. When you can no longer comfortably bend over to tend your garden, he willingly takes over the weeding and watering. When walking becomes uncomfortable, he suggests quiet evenings at home instead of social visits. When you become too large to comfortably share your usual chair in the parlour, he immediately purchases a much wider one designed specifically for your changing needs. "You're being ridiculously considerate," you tell him one October evening as he helps you settle into your new chair, with cushions arranged just so. "I'm being appropriately considerate," he corrects. "You're creating a human being. That seems to merit some extra attention." The baby arrives on a snowy December morning, just 3 days after your second wedding anniversary. The labour is long and genuinely difficult, but when Dr. Matthews finally places your daughter in your arms, the pain simply vanishes. She is perfectly formed and remarkably alert, with Thomas' deep brown eyes and what promises to be your determined chin. "She's beautiful," Thomas whispers, settling gently beside you on the bed to take his first close look at his daughter. "She looks just like you." "She looks like herself," you say, marvelling at the tiny fingers that grip yours with surprising strength. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." You name her Charlotte, after the author whose novels you've grown to love despite their scandalous reputation. Charlotte Weatherby, a name that sounds both proper and slightly adventurous, which seems entirely fitting for a daughter who arrived during a blizzard with very obvious opinions about the timing. The first few months of motherhood are exhausting in ways you never anticipated. Charlotte proves to be a demanding baby who sleeps fitfully and nurses frequently. Mrs. Davies hires her niece, Sarah, to help with the additional cleaning and laundry, but much of the primary responsibility falls to you. Thomas helps as much as Victorian convention allows, taking over the nighttime feedings when possible and entertaining Charlotte while you rest during the afternoons. "I had no idea babies were such complete tyrants," you confess to Thomas one morning after a particularly rough night. "She has very strong opinions for someone who can't even properly hold her head up." "She's definitely your daughter," he replies with a gentle grin that suggests this is a compliment rather than a criticism. As Charlotte progresses from a demanding newborn to an alert infant to a curious toddler, your household settles into new, comfortable rhythms. Thomas's career continues to advance. His promotion has led to greater responsibility and the clear promise of further promotion. You've started writing in earnest, beginning with short articles for women's magazines about household management and child rearing, then gradually moving toward more ambitious projects. Your second child, James, arrives when Charlotte is 2 years old, followed 18 months later by little Mary. The house in Kensington, once perfectly adequate for just 2 people, becomes delightfully chaotic with 3 small children and the additional staff needed to manage them all. By your 5th wedding anniversary, you and Thomas have become pillars of your small community. Thomas serves on the church, vestry, and the local school board. You organise charitable events for poor mothers and children, drawing on your own experience to advocate for practical, direct assistance rather than moral lectures. Your dinner parties are known for their lively conversation and excellent food, and young couples often seek out your advice about the early challenges of marriage. One evening in late spring, as you're tucking Charlotte into bed while Thomas reads to the younger children in the adjoining nursery, she asks a question that catches you entirely off guard. "Mama, how did you know Papa was the right person to marry?" You pause in your brushing of her dark curls, considering how exactly to explain the complex process of Victorian courtship to a 5-year-old. "Well, darling, we spent time getting to know each other very carefully. We talked about important things and discovered that we truly enjoyed each other's company." But how did you know he would be a good papa? This is much more difficult to answer truthfully. The Thomas who courted you so formally was kind and considerate, but you had absolutely no way of knowing he would become the father who meticulously builds elaborate dollhouses for his daughters and teaches his son to identify every type of tree in the park. I suppose I didn't know for certain, you admit, but I knew he was gentle and honest, and that he truly cared about other people's feelings. Those seemed like qualities that would make someone a good father as well as a good husband. After Charlotte finally falls asleep, you find Thomas in the parlour with a book, but he sets it aside when you settle beside him on the sofa you purchased to accommodate your growing family. "Charlotte asked me how I knew you would be a good father," you tell him. And what did you tell her? That I recognised the qualities that truly matter: kindness, honesty, consideration for others. You pause, studying his face in the lamplight. "I was right, wasn't I?" "I hope so," he says quietly. "I certainly try very hard to be." As your children grow and your marriage deepens, you often think about the elaborate social machinery that first brought you and Thomas together. The etiquette books with their rigid rules, the chaperones who supervised every single interaction, the formal dances of courtship that now seem almost quaint in retrospect. Yet somehow, despite all those constraints and conventions, something truly real and lasting emerged. 2 people who might never have met in different circumstances found each other and built a shared life together. Not the dramatic passion of romantic novels, but something far more sustainable, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of deep affection that grows stronger rather than weaker over the course of time. On quiet evenings, when the children are asleep and the house is peaceful and still around you, you and Thomas still sit together, either reading or talking about the day's events. The conversation flows just as easily as it did during those early supervised walks in the park, but now it is richly enhanced by years of shared experience and common purpose. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" you ask him one such evening, looking up from the letter you're writing to your cousin in Scotland. "Sometimes," he admits, though I can't clearly picture it anymore. This life with you and the children feels like the only true possibility. The world around you is changing rapidly. Railways have completely revolutionized travel, making it possible to visit distant relatives in mere hours rather than days. Gaslighting is becoming common in better neighbourhoods, pushing back the deep darkness that once defined winter evenings. Photography is growing more sophisticated, allowing families to preserve detailed images of their children at every stage of their growth. But the fundamental rhythms of domestic life remain constant. Children still need to be fed, clothed, and educated. Households still require careful management and care. Marriages still depend on daily kindness and genuine consideration between partners who have chosen to link their fates together forever. Looking back on your journey from nervous young woman to confident wife and mother, you are struck by how the elaborate social structures of Victorian courtship, for all their rigidity and artificiality, served an important purpose. They provided a necessary framework within which two relative strangers could carefully evaluate each other's character and compatibility before making a serious commitment that would ultimately shape the rest of their lives. The constraints that once seemed so utterly oppressive, the constant supervision, the formal rules of interaction, the careful progression from mere acquaintance to engagement, actually created a space for gradual, thoughtful discovery. You and Thomas learned to know each other's minds before you shared physical intimacy, to appreciate each other's true characters before you committed to a shared future. Modern young people, you suspect, would find such restrictions nearly impossible to tolerate. But there was something meaningful to be said for the patience those conventions enforced. The careful building of a relationship on a solid foundation of mutual respect and deep understanding. As you blow out the lamp and prepare to join Thomas upstairs, you feel a deep gratitude for the peculiar social machinery that brought you together. Without those etiquette books and chaperones, without the formal structure of calling hours and supervised walks, you might never have discovered that the serious young man from India and the nervous young woman from London could create something truly beautiful together. Your story began with a simple knock at the door on a spring afternoon in 1855, when two carefully dressed people sat in a flower-filled parlour and attempted to determine whether they could build a shared life. It continues now in a house full of children's laughter and the comfortable silence of a couple who have learned to be truly at home with each other. The Victorian era, with all its rigid propriety and elaborate social rules, created the specific framework within which love could grow slowly and surely, like roses carefully tended in a walled garden. And sometimes, just sometimes, that patient cultivation produced something rare and lasting, a partnership that could weather the storms of illness and change, the challenges of parenthood and responsibility, and the simple daily work of caring for another person's happiness just as carefully as your own. In the end, that's what dating was truly like in the Victorian era. Not the spontaneous passion of modern romance, but something far more deliberate and perhaps more durable. A careful, measured dance that allowed two people to discover whether they could genuinely trust each other with their futures, their dreams, and their deepest hopes for lasting happiness. As you drift towards sleep in the bed you've shared for 7 years now, Thomas breathing steadily beside you and the house quiet around your sleeping children, you understand that you've been part of something larger than your individual story. You've participated in one of humanity's most enduring endeavours, the ancient dance of courtship and commitment, played out according to the particular rules of your time and place. The world will continue to change dramatically, and future generations will find their own ways of discovering love and building families. But the fundamental human longing for connection, for partnership, for someone to share the joys and sorrows of life, that will remain constant no matter how dramatically the social conventions evolve. And maybe, just maybe, there was a quiet wisdom in taking time, in moving slowly, in building love on a foundation of friendship and respect, rather than passion alone. Maybe the Victorians, for all their restrictions and formalities, understood something important about the patient, necessary work of creating lasting happiness with another human being. The last thing you remember before sleep claims you is Thomas's hand finding yours across the space between your pillows, a simple gesture that has become as natural as breathing after all these years of marriage. Tomorrow will bring its own pleasures and challenges, but tonight you rest in the security of knowing that you chose well, that the careful dance of Victorian courtship led you to exactly where you belong.